Alright, so my layout line, I was trying to pare away on the chisel there, and then when I brought the chisel in, you could see that I'm starting to go inside where this grain is kind of telling that chisel to go. I'm no longer cutting a nice clean line that's parallel to these edges. So be careful of that. I'm less worried about the top and bottom or the edges of this joint. I am much more concerned about the thickness of this joint. Those are the areas that are going to provide the glue surface inside of the mortise. So that's what I want to show you here. It's going to be a bit of a factor, but I will not continue in the same method that I did to make that mistake. So that brings us to the bench to talk about another couple options. All right, cool. So this cheek is a little bit all over the place. The saw was cutting at a bit of an angle, which is okay, and that's going to be pretty typical. From this position, I can start to drag the chisel across and start cleaning these things up, but I don't know that this is the best solution for this application. I think that with chisel work, you're going to start to have a tendency of rolling this or tipping this chisel one way or the other, which are not helpful. I'm going to get rid of this. So instead of a chisel for doing this, what I want to talk about is using a low angle block plane. This one is pretty great because it can get into relatively tight areas. I don't know why I have rust on you, but that's something I need to look at. So I can start planing this board across, not all the way across because that will start to give me a lot of tear out, but I can start getting in there and taking out larger surface area than I could do with the chisel. And I have my layout lines here on the end of the board, but I've also translated them over here, so those are good references to know where it is I need to be from doing this. Alright, that's pretty good. I'm getting close on this corner. So what I want to do is take off evenly. Same face is facing up at the moment. Then I'm going to come over to the opposite corner and drag this plane across until I've got a bit more consistency where I want to be. So when I'm doing that, I need to be aware of the benefits of this tool, but also the limitations. I can go mostly across this surface area, which is good, but the limitation of this tool, we can see from the sole of the plane, is that this blade has a limit. It doesn't go all the way across. So I'm not cutting on that last strong eighth, 3/16 of an inch into where the shoulder needs to be. So because of that, it's going to cut consistently where that blade is and then not where the blade cannot cut. And so I might get into a tendency that this starts to create a bit of an angle or a geometry that I don't want. So this is a good tool, not a great one for finishing. I like where it starts, but it can't do everything. I think a better option is something called a shoulder plane. And a shoulder plane, low angle, similar to the block plane, but the big difference you can see on the sole here, that blade extends all the way across the sole of the plane, and actually it's a little bit wider than the thickness of this plane. So this is a great one for getting right up into where it is we want to go. The thing of it is we need to tune this up every single time we use it. And so because that blade is a little bit wider than the body of this plane, I need to loosen up that plane, press down on the side of the plane that's going to go up against the cheek, and then lock this little wheel back into place. By doing so, then I can cut right on top of that shoulder. And for those of you following along, that has a lot to do with where this tool got its name from. Shoulder plane is because you can get right up into the shoulder, and because it's a low angle, you can actually cut it, or cut in this orientation as well, cutting the end grain of the shoulder. So that looks like we're finishing up anything that the block plane was unable to do. And I'm just trying to sight down my layout line onto that cheek to make sure I have everything I need. yet. I haven't cut anything on the far end of this joint, but I just want to see how close I'm getting. Yeah, getting close. It's a little bit tight, but I can start this joint into the mortise, which is good. So I need to be careful about not removing any more of that than is necessary. So in doing that, I'm going to start truing up using the same tool. Now I have to reset it. Alright, then I can come over here and start evening those things out. Watching that layout line pretty carefully, make sure that I'm not taking more than I want. Alright, I think I'm getting pretty close. So I don't feel any big ridges here. It looks like it's getting pretty close straight across on both of these cheeks. I worked on this cheek before I hit record, so I have a bit of a lead on this. Alright, so a little bit thick. So I can do two things. I can continue to go with either the block plane, or I can use the shoulder plane and continue to get this fit dialed in. But I want to introduce another tool that I think is kind of amazing for this operation, and that is the router plane. The router plane has a blade on the bottom here. These can be swapped out for narrower, slightly wider, chisel point. All of those things are great, but for what we're doing today, this is an easy solution for what we're doing. So I need to anchor the my left hand in this situation on the face of the board, and that's going to hold this true without letting it rock or dip. The next thing I want to do is lower this blade until I'm starting to cut into that material. There we go. Then we'll lock that into place. Oops, I lost it. And I can continue to rock this thing across. Make sure I have a good angle of this. Oh, you're not going to work it. So the big difference with this tool is that with the other ones there was nothing where we're using that creates a parallel environment from the face of the board to the cheek of the joint. This one, when used correctly, I can start cutting all the way across here and get something nice and consistent all the way across. Alright, so next time I want to check for my fit. I'm going to drop this down just a little bit more. It's pretty great when it works well. Oops, might be taking off a little bit much. And it's kind of a fun tool to use to get in and dial in joinery you're working on, because unless you try really hard, it's going to be tough to throw this one off. Alright, that's probably a bit more interesting. So with this you can probably see the kind of cut we're making, and there are some real limitations to how much material we can remove. So just like with using a hand plane or even the block plane we had a second ago, I really have to kind of inch up on this thing. And to refer to this in units of inches is somewhat misleading, because we can never remove an inch of material with this plane. Alright, that's starting to feel much better. Yeah, I could probably work with that. Okay, so I'll continue on this setting. I'm not going to readjust. Until I can cleanly take the stuff out. You'll probably find that clamping this board down is going to make your life much easier. I probably should have done that. Okay. At this point I've got a big section of material there. I could remove this with a shoulder plane, that would work just fine. But instead what I'm going to do is start to clean these up with chisels. I think that what I'm taking out is it's a little bit easier to have your chisel follow the reference that you just made. Again, I want to keep my fingers away from behind this chisel. I don't want to catch it. I don't want to get in the habit of catching it. Probably see a little bit better. Now that I'm using the flat surface we just made with those other tools, I can get in with that chisel and start to true this up. Yeah, that's good. That'll work. So at this point, I'm done with the thickness. Now I just need to clean up the edges here. And once I've done that, then I'm ready to get into fitting the other ends or cleaning up the shoulders as discussed. So hopefully that was helpful. Good luck.